The starship Meridian moved through space like a silver needle threading through black cloth. Its hull gleamed under the distant light of foreign suns as it approached the massive space station that hung in orbit around the dead world of Nexus, Prime. The station was huge, bigger than most moons, with towers and docking bays stretching out in all directions like the arms of some metal spider. Ambassador Jack Harrison stood in the observation deck, his weathered hands clasped behind his back as he watched the station grow larger in the viewport. He was an older man, his hair more gray than brown now, with lines around his eyes that spoke of too many difficult conversations in too many alien meeting rooms. Today would likely add a few more lines to his face. "We're getting close, Ambassador," came a voice from behind him. Captain Lisa Morgan stepped up beside him, her blue uniform crisp and her expression serious. She was younger than Harrison, with short blonde hair and the kind of steady eyes that came from years of navigating both space and politics. "The station control is asking for our credentials again." Harrison nodded but didn't turn away from the view. "Give them what they want, Captain. We're here because they demanded it, after all." The message had arrived 3 weeks ago, transmitted across hundreds of light years of space with the official seal of the Galactic Collective Council. It was short and cold, nothing like the usual diplomatic language that filled most communications between species. The Council wanted humanity to appear before them immediately to answer charges of excessive intervention in primitive species development and destabilization of established galactic order. Harrison had read the message a dozen times, trying to understand what humanity had done wrong. They had helped other species, yes. They had shared medical supplies with the Kalari when a plague threatened to wipe out their colonies. They had given farming techniques to the Nixari when drought made their worlds barren. They had quietly placed defense satellites around planets that raiders liked to attack, but they had never asked for anything in return. No territory, no tribute, no trade agreements that favored Earth. They helped because people were suffering, and humans had learned long ago that suffering should be stopped when it was possible to stop it. "I still don't understand what we did wrong," Captain Morgan said, as if reading his thoughts. "We made the other powers nervous," Harrison replied. "When you help people for free, it makes those who charge for help look bad." The Meridian passed through the outer defense grid of the station without challenge. Harrison could see other ships docked at the various bays, the sleek vessels of the Velhari Trade Consortium, the angular warships of the Zephyrian military, the massive cargo, haulers of the Arctonian Corporate Alliance. Each species had their own section of the station, their own rules, their own way of doing business. Humans had been part of this system for 50 years now, ever since first contact had brought Earth into the galactic community. At first, everyone had been curious about the newcomers. Humans were not the strongest species, not the smartest, not the most advanced. But they had something that puzzled the other races. They genuinely seemed to care about strangers. "Docking Bay 77 is assigned to us," Captain Morgan reported. "It's in the diplomatic section." Harrison finally turned away from the viewport. "How's the crew holding up?" "They're nervous," she admitted. "Nobody likes being called to answer charges when they know they haven't done anything wrong, but they're ready to do their duty." The docking process was smooth and routine. The Meridian settled into its assigned bay with barely a vibration, and Harrison gathered his small diplomatic team. There was Dr. Helen Carter, Earth's top expert on alien biology, her dark hair pulled back in a practical bun, and her tablet full of data on every species they might encounter. Engineer Paul Rodriguez carried files on all the technology humanity had shared with other worlds, his quiet manner hiding a brilliant mind for solving problems. Colonel Susan Blake, their military advisor, stood straight and alert, her experience in peacekeeping operations evident in every controlled movement. Theater. Station's artificial gravity felt heavier than Earth normal, set to accommodate the preferences of the larger alien species. The corridors were wide and tall, with moving walkways that carried beings of dozens of different shapes and sizes. Harrison had been here many times before, but it still amazed him to see the diversity of life that filled the galaxy. They passed, Kellery merchants with their long, graceful necks and feathered crests, their musical voices discussing trade agreements in their flowing language. A group of Nexari farmers clustered around a data terminal, their rocky skin and patient expressions making them look like living sculptures. Ythron colonists hurried past with their distinctive blue-tinged skin, probably heading to immigration offices to file reports from their frontier worlds. Many of these beings nodded respectfully to the human delegation as they passed. Some even smiled, which Harrison found encouraging. If the common people of the galaxy still viewed humans favorably, perhaps the situation wasn't as bad as it seemed. The council chambers were located at the heart of the station, accessed through a series of security checkpoints and ceremonial passages designed to impress visitors with the power and authority of the galactic government. The ceiling soared overhead, decorated with the symbols of 200 member species arranged in complex patterns that supposedly represented unity and cooperation. Harrison had always thought it looked more like a prison than a parliament. There, assigned seats were in the defendants section, a detail that told Harrison everything he needed to know about how this session would go. The chambers were filling up with representatives from across the galaxy, but Harrison noticed that many of the seats remained empty. The species that humanity had helped over the years seemed to be poorly represented today. "Look at who is here," Dr. Carter whispered, nodding toward the front rows. The Velhari delegation took up an entire section, their tall, thin forms draped in the expensive fabrics that marked their wealth. They controlled much of the galaxy's trade, charging high prices for goods and services that other species desperately needed. Humanity's habit of giving things away for free had cut into their profits significantly. The Zephyrian military caste occupied another prominent section, their scaled skin gleaming under the chamber lights, and their cold eyes fixed on the human delegation. They believed that strong species should dominate weak ones, that the galaxy worked best when the powerful took what they wanted from those too weak to resist. Human peacekeeping efforts had prevented several Zephyrian expansions into vulnerable territories. Most concerning was the presence of the Arctonian Corporate Alliance, whose representatives filled nearly a quarter of the chamber. They were the galaxy's industrialists, strip mining worlds and exploiting labor wherever they could find it. Human defensive assistance to primitive worlds had blocked several profitable operations, and their faces showed they had not forgotten. Council Speaker Vex Thari entered the chamber with great ceremony, her multiple arms moving in ritualistic patterns as she took her position at the central podium. Her species was ancient and supposedly neutral, but Harrison had learned that neutrality often favored whoever paid the most. "The Galactic Collective Council calls this session to order," she announced, her voice carrying easily through the vast space. "We are here to address serious charges brought against the species known as humanity." Harrison felt his team tense beside him, but he kept his expression calm. He had been through trials before, though never one where simple compassion was treated as a crime. "The charges are as follows," Vex Thari continued, reading from a crystal tablet that glowed with official symbols. "First, excessive intervention in the development of primitive species, disrupting natural evolutionary processes. Second, destabilization of established trade relationships through the unauthorized distribution of goods and services. Third, the spread of dangerous ideological concepts that threaten the stability of galactic civilization." The chamber fell silent as the weight of the accusations settled over the assembled delegates. Harrison stood slowly, feeling the eyes of hundreds of alien beings upon him. "Humanity acknowledges the charges," he said simply. "We are ready to respond." Trade Minister Kelthana of the Velhari rose from her seat like a snake uncoiling. Her pale blue skin seemed to shimmer under the chamber lights as she approached the central speaking area. She was tall and thin, with long fingers that moved gracefully as she spoke, but her eyes were cold and calculating. "Honored Council," she began, her voice carrying the musical tones of her species. "The Velhari Consortium has served this galaxy for over 1,000 years. We have built the trade networks that keep civilization functioning. We have established the supply chains that bring medicine to the sick, food to the hungry, and tools to those who need them." She paused, letting her words sink in before continuing. "But now this order is under attack. The humans have chosen to give away what should be sold, to interfere with markets that have operated successfully for centuries. A holographic display materialized in the center of the chamber, showing trade routes that crisscrossed the galaxy like glowing threads. Red markers indicated disruptions, places where the normal flow of commerce had been interrupted. "Look at the Kalari system," Kelthana said, pointing to a cluster of worlds near the galaxy's edge. "For 300 years they have purchased medical supplies from Velhari distributors. Yes, the prices were high, but that is the nature of business. Supply and demand determine value." The display zoomed in on the Kalari world, showing shipping records and financial data. Then the plague struck. A terrible disease, yes, but also an opportunity for increased trade. The Kalari would have paid premium prices for medicine, as they should. Instead, the humans arrived with free supplies. Dr. Carter shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Harrison could see her hands clenched into fists, but she remained silent. "The humans claim they acted from compassion," Kelthana continued, "but the result was the same as an act of war against our economy. We lost over 2 billion credits in potential revenue. Worse, the Kalari now refuse to pay fair market prices for anything. They have been contaminated with the human idea that advanced species should help primitive ones for free." Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Some delegates nodded in agreement, while others seemed uncomfortable with the cold calculation in Kelthana's words. "This is not an isolated incident," the trade minister said. "The Nexari drought should have been a profitable opportunity to sell water purification systems and agricultural equipment. Instead, humans gave away the technology for free. The Yithran colonies should have been excellent customers for defensive systems. Instead, human peacekeepers provided protection without charge." The holographic display showed incident after incident, each one marked with the financial losses suffered by various corporations and trading houses. The numbers were staggering. Billions of credits in lost profits across dozens of worlds. "The humans have destroyed the economic foundation of galactic civilization," Kelthana concluded. "They have taught primitive species to expect charity instead of working to earn what they need. This cannot be allowed to continue." She returned to her seat with satisfaction evident on her face. Several Velhari delegates made approving gestures, and Harrison noticed that representatives from other trading species were nodding in agreement. Next came General Krex of the Zephyrian military caste. He was a large being, his scaled skin dark green and his eyes like yellow fire. When he spoke, his voice rumbled through the chamber like distant thunder. "The Velhari speak of money," he said, his tone dismissive. "Money is nothing compared to the true damage the humans have done. They have interfered with the natural order of the galaxy." A new display appeared showing the galactic map with different species marked in various colors. Red indicated strong, militaristic civilizations. Blue showed weak, primitive worlds. Green marked species that had been conquered or absorbed by stronger neighbors. "For millions of years, the galaxy has operated on a simple principle," Krex explained. "The strong survive and prosper. The weak are conquered or die out. This is natural law, as fundamental as gravity or the speed of light." He gestured to the display with a clawed hand. "The humans have violated this law. They protect the weak, preventing the strong from claiming what should be theirs. They have created artificial barriers to natural selection." The display zoomed in on several systems where human peacekeepers had intervened to stop conflicts. Here, the Zephyrian Empire was expanding into the Nexari border worlds. These primitive farmers could not defend themselves, so they should have been conquered. Instead, human ships arrived and forced our fleets to withdraw. Harrison remembered that incident. The Nexari had been growing food crops when Zephyrian raiders attacked. The farmers had no weapons, no military training, nothing, but their fields and their families. Human peacekeepers had positioned themselves between the raiders and the colonies, not firing a shot but making it clear that any attack would be met with resistance. "The humans claimed they were protecting innocent civilians," Krex continued, "but they were actually preventing the natural development of galactic society. Strong species expand and grow stronger. Weak species are absorbed or eliminated. This is how evolution works, how civilization advances." More examples appeared on the display. Human interventions in conflicts across the galaxy, each one preventing what the Zephyrians saw as natural conquest. By protecting the weak, the humans have made them weaker, Krex declared. They have created a galaxy full of species that cannot defend themselves, that expect others to solve their problems. This is not compassion, it is cruelty. The general's words seemed to resonate with several military delegations. Harrison could see nods of approval from species that had built their civilizations on conquest and expansion. The humans have also contaminated primitive species with dangerous ideas, Krex added. They teach that all life has value, that strong species have obligations to weak ones, that cooperation is better than competition. These ideas make civilizations soft and weak. As Krex returned to his seat, Harrison felt the weight of hostile stares from across the chamber. The economic and military arguments were building a case that humanity was not just wrong, but dangerous to the established order of galactic society. The final speaker was Corporate Director Malreth of the Arctonian Alliance. He was different from the previous speakers, smaller, more human-like in appearance, but with eyes that seemed to calculate the value of everything they saw. My colleagues have spoken of lost profits and military concerns, Malreth said, his voice smooth and reasonable. But the real danger is ideological contamination. A new display appeared, showing social and political data from dozens of worlds. Before human contact, galactic civilization operated on clear principles. Advanced species exploited the resources of primitive worlds. Corporations extracted materials efficiently, without concern for local populations. This system worked because everyone understood their place. The display showed mining operations, agricultural exploitation, and industrial development across multiple worlds. The Arctonian Alliance has built profitable enterprises on over 300 worlds. We provide jobs, technology, and economic development. In return, we extract resources and labor at rates that ensure profitability. Harrison's jaw tightened. He knew what Arctonian development looked like. Strip mines that left worlds barren, factories that poisoned air and water, work camps where local populations labored for subsistence wages. But human interference has disrupted this system, Malreth continued. They have taught primitive species to value their environments over industrial development. They have spread concepts of individual rights and democratic governance that interfere with efficient resource extraction. The display showed specific examples. Worlds where human advisors had helped local populations organize resistance to Arctonian operations. Planets where human environmental technology had provided alternatives to destructive mining practices. Kepler 7, our mining operation was forced to shut down after humans taught the natives about environmental protection. On Vega Prime, our agricultural processing plants were closed when locals demanded workers' rights. On dozens of worlds, profitable operations have been ruined by human contamination. Malreth's presentation was the most damning yet. It showed how human values were spreading through the galaxy like a virus, infecting primitive species with ideas that threatened the established order. The humans have created a crisis of authority, he concluded. Primitive species no longer accept their proper place in the galactic hierarchy. They demand rights they have not earned, protections they cannot provide for themselves, and treatment as equals when they are clearly inferior. As the prosecution concluded their case, Harrison looked around the chamber. The message was clear. Humanity was guilty of the crime of compassion, of treating other species as equals rather than resources to be exploited. The established powers had built their civilizations on the suffering of others, and human kindness threatened to bring their profitable system crashing down. Now it was humanity's turn to respond. Harrison stood slowly, feeling the weight of history settling on his shoulders. What he said next would determine not just humanity's fate, but the future of every species in the galaxy that dared to dream of something better than exploitation and conquest. Ambassador Jack Harrison stood up slowly, his weathered face calm despite the hostile atmosphere in the chamber. The eyes of hundreds of alien beings were fixed on him, waiting to see how humanity would defend itself against charges that seemed impossible to deny. After all, humans had done exactly what they were accused of. They had helped others without asking for payment. Honored Council, Harrison began, his voice carrying clearly through the vast chamber. We do not deny the charges brought against us. Humans did provide medical aid to the Kalari during their plague. We did share agricultural technology with the Nexari during their drought. We did protect vulnerable worlds from raiders and conquerors. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Many delegates had expected denials, legal arguments, or attempts to justify human actions within existing galactic law. Harrison's simple admission caught them off guard. We did these things, Harrison continued, because people were suffering, and we had the ability to help. In human culture, when someone is drowning, you throw them a rope. You do not negotiate the price of the rope while they sink. Dr. Helen Carter stood next, her tablet glowing with data she had spent years collecting. The Council has heard about the economic impact of our actions, she said, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. But let me tell you about the human impact. A holographic display materialized, but instead of trade routes and profit margins, it showed living beings. Kalari children playing in streets that should have been empty graveyards. Nexari farmers harvesting crops from fields that should have been dust. Ythron colonists building homes on worlds that should have been strip mines. Every intervention we made was carefully planned, Dr. Carter explained. We did not create dependency. We shared knowledge, not just supplies. We taught the Kalari to manufacture their own medicines. We showed the Nexari how to build their own water purification systems. We helped the Ythrans develop their own defensive capabilities. The display showed technical readouts and progress reports from dozens of worlds. Species that had received human aid were not weaker. They were stronger, more self-sufficient, more capable of solving their own problems. The prosecution claims we violated natural selection, Dr. Carter said, looking directly at General Krex. But human evolution taught us that cooperation is more powerful than competition. Our species survived ice ages and plagues not by fighting each other, but by helping each other. We shared food, shelter, and knowledge because we learned that a strong community protects everyone better than strong individuals protect themselves. Engineer Paul Rodriguez took his turn next, his quiet manner hiding the passion in his words. The Council has been told that our technology sharing was reckless, he said. But every piece of technology we shared was appropriate to each species' development level. We gave the Kalari chemical formulas for medicines they could manufacture with their existing industrial base. We showed the Nexari irrigation techniques that worked with their agricultural knowledge. We did not dump advanced technology on primitive worlds. His display showed careful analysis of technological compatibility, charts that demonstrated how human aid had accelerated natural development, rather than disrupting it. We were teachers, not conquerors. We shared knowledge that would have been discovered naturally just sooner than it would have happened without help. Colonel Susan Blake stepped forward, her military bearing evident in every movement. The prosecution claims that our peacekeeping activities weakened galactic civilization, she said. But strength built on the oppression of others is not strength at all. It is bullying. Her display showed the conflicts where human peacekeepers had intervened. In every case, they had positioned themselves between aggressors and victims, using their presence to deter violence rather than create it. We never fired the first shot, Colonel Blake stated firmly. We never conquered territory or demanded tribute. We simply made it clear that attacking innocent civilians would have consequences. The strong who complain about our interference are not strong at all. They are predators who grew fat on easy prey. As the human defense continued, something strange began to happen in the chamber. The prosecution had painted humanity as dangerous disruptors of galactic order, but the evidence suggested something different. Humans were not conquerors or exploiters. They were helpers who asked for nothing in return. The most powerful moment came when Harrison activated a new display, one that showed messages from across the galaxy. Not official government communications or corporate reports, but personal messages from ordinary beings whose lives had been touched by human compassion. A Kalari mother appeared in holographic form, her feathered crest trembling with emotion as she spoke. My children were dying from the plague, she said in her musical voice. The Velhari medicine was too expensive for us to buy. We could only watch as our little ones grew weaker. Then the humans came with free medicine and taught our doctors how to make more. My children live because humans cared about strangers. A Nexari farmer materialized next, his rocky skin weathered by years of drought. Our world was dying, he said simply. The Arctonians offered to buy our land for mining, but it was all we had. The humans showed us how to find water deep underground, how to grow crops that needed less rain. They saved our world and asked for nothing. The testimonies continued, one after another. Ythran colonists who still lived on their homeworld because human satellites had protected them from raiders. Miners who had jobs that paid fair wages because human advisors had helped them organize. Children who could read because human teachers had shared educational technology. Each testimony was brief, personal, and powerful. These were not government officials or corporate representatives. They were ordinary people whose lives had been made better by human kindness. The chamber grew quiet as delegate after delegate heard voices they had never listened to before. When the testimonies ended, Harrison spoke again. The prosecution is correct about one thing, he said. Human actions have been disruptive. We have disrupted profitable exploitation. We have disrupted the natural selection of conquest. We have disrupted the idea that advanced civilizations should prey on primitive ones. He paused, looking around the chamber at the faces of beings from across the galaxy. We are guilty of believing that intelligence creates obligation, that strength should protect weakness, that advanced civilizations should lift up those who are struggling instead of stepping on them. The chamber fell completely silent. Harrison's words hung in the air like a challenge to everything the galactic powers had built their civilizations upon. Council Speaker Vexthari called for a recess while the judges deliberated. The human delegation was escorted to a waiting area where they sat in tense silence, knowing that their fate and the fate of human ideals across the galaxy would soon be decided. When the session resumed 3 hours later, the chamber was even more crowded than before. Word had spread throughout the station about the unusual trial, and beings from dozens of species had come to witness the verdict. Vexithari stood at the central podium, her multiple arms moving in formal patterns as she prepared to announce the decision. The Galactic Collective Council has reached a verdict on the charges against humanity, she declared. Harrison and his team stood to receive the judgment, their faces showing no emotion despite the tension that filled the air. On the charge of excessive intervention in primitive species development, we find humanity guilty, Vexithari announced. On the charge of destabilizing established galactic order, we find humanity guilty. On the charge of spreading dangerous ideological concepts, we find humanity guilty. The chamber erupted in a mixture of cheers and protests. The established powers celebrated their victory, while voices from the gallery shouted objections. The sentence is as follows, Vexithari continued, her voice cutting through the noise. Humanity will cease all aid activities immediately. They will pay reparations of 500 billion credits to affected corporations and trading houses. They will submit all future activities to council oversight and approval. Finally, humanity will issue a formal apology for their crimes against galactic civilization. The punishment was designed to be humiliating, to reduce humanity from a respected member of the galactic community to a supervised child. The established powers expected humans to negotiate, to plead for mercy, to accept some lesser punishment in exchange for acknowledgement of council authority. Instead, Ambassador Harrison did something that stunned the entire galaxy. He smiled. We understand the council's position, Harrison said, his voice carrying clearly through the shocked silence. We reject both your judgment and your authority over human conscience. The chamber erupted in chaos. No species had ever simply rejected a council verdict. Representatives shouted questions, made demands, threatened consequences. Through it all, Harrison stood calmly, waiting for the noise to die down. We will not pay tribute for the crime of caring, he continued when he could be heard again. We will not apologize for choosing compassion over profit. We will not submit to oversight by those who see suffering as an opportunity for exploitation. General Krex rose from his seat, his scaled face twisted with anger. The message reached every human outpost, colony, and station across the galaxy within hours. 3 simple words that would change everything. Come home. On the trading hub of Kepler-7, Captain Ray Thompson was loading cargo when his communication device chimed with the priority message from Ambassador Harrison. He read it twice, then looked up at the bustling marketplace around him. Kalari merchants were haggling over prices with Nexari farmers. Yithran colonists were buying supplies for their frontier worlds. It was a scene he had witnessed thousands of times before, but now everything felt different. Ray had been running shipping routes in this sector for 15 years. His company, Thompson Freight, was known throughout the region for honest dealing and fair prices. Unlike many human businesses, he had never charged extra fees or demanded special contracts. If someone needed supplies delivered, he delivered them, whether they could pay full price or not. His Kellery business partner, Vel Nara, approached his ship with concern written across her feathered features. "Ray, we just heard strange reports from the council station. Is it true that humanity is withdrawing from the collective?" Ray finished securing his cargo before answering. "It's true, Velnara. We've been told our help isn't wanted, so we're listening. But what about our shipping contracts? What about the medical supplies we need next month?" Ray handed her a data pad with information about alternative suppliers. "I've compiled a list of reliable companies that can handle your routes. Most are more expensive than what I charged, but they're honest dealers." Velnara's crest drooped with sadness. "This is because you helped us during the plague, isn't it? Because you delivered medicine for free when we couldn't afford to pay?" "Among other things," Ray admitted. "The council decided that helping people was a crime, so we're removing ourselves from the situation entirely." As Ray settled his accounts and prepared to leave, word of the human withdrawal spread through the trading hub like wildfire. Other human businesses were doing the same thing, closing their operations, paying their debts, and preparing to depart. There were no angry confrontations, no dramatic speeches. Humans simply finished their work and left. The pattern was repeated across the galaxy. On Research Station Omega-3, Dr. Elizabeth Stone was uploading her xenobiology research to public databases when her Nexari research assistant Kethmar found her packing. "Dr. Stone, surely you're not leaving too?" Kethmar asked, his rocky features showing distress. "Our research on plant adaptation is so close to completion." Elizabeth looked up from her files with sadness in her eyes. "I'm uploading everything to the Open Research Network. You and the team can continue the work without me, but we need your expertise. Your understanding of genetic modification is years ahead of ours. You're smarter than you think, Kethmar. I've seen your work. You don't need me anymore. You never really did. I just helped you see what you are already capable of." She handed him a sealed data crystal. "This contains all my notes on the projects we discussed but never started. Use them however you think best." Kethmar held the crystal like it was precious. "This is wrong. You shouldn't be punished for helping us." "We're not being punished," Elizabeth said gently. "We're making a choice. The council told us to stop helping, so we're simply removing ourselves from places where we might be tempted to help." The most dramatic withdrawals came from the military sectors. Human peacekeeping forces had been involved in dozens of ongoing operations across the galaxy, from anti-piracy patrols to border disputes to humanitarian missions. Suddenly, they all received the same order: return to base immediately. Commander. Jake Mitchell was leading a patrol in the frontier sectors when the recall order came through. His small fleet had been tracking Arctonian raiders who were harassing independent mining colonies. It was routine work, the kind of low-level peacekeeping that prevented small conflicts from becoming major wars. "Sir, we're in the middle of an operation," his tactical officer pointed out. "The miners are counting on us to keep those raiders away." Mitchell studied the tactical display showing raider positions and mining colony defenses. "Signal the mining station. Tell them we're being recalled and won't be able to continue patrols." "What about the raiders, sir?" "That's not our problem anymore." The human ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving the miners to face the raiders alone. Similar scenes played out across the galaxy as human peacekeepers abandoned their posts without explanation. Border conflicts that had been kept quiet by human mediation suddenly flared into open warfare. Shipping lanes that had been safe under Human protection became hunting grounds for pirates. On the diplomatic front, the withdrawal was equally systematic. Human ambassadors throughout the galaxy received their instructions and began the process of closing embassies and ending formal relationships with the collective government. Ambassador Sarah Kim had served on the Zephyrian homeworld for 8 years, working to maintain peace between the aggressive military culture and their more peaceful neighbors. When she requested a meeting with the Zephyrian High Command to announce her departure, General Vexikar was incredulous. "You cannot simply leave in the middle of ongoing negotiations," the general growled, his scaled face showing confusion more than anger. "The border treaty with the Nexari requires human mediation." "I'm afraid that's no longer possible, General," Ambassador Kim replied calmly. "Humanity no longer recognizes the authority of the Galactic Collective, which means we can no longer serve as neutral mediators in collective disputes. But without human mediation, the Nexari will never agree to territorial adjustments. They trust you, not us." "Then perhaps you should ask yourself why they trust us and not you." General Vexkar leaned forward, his yellow eyes intense. "What do you want? What will it take to make humanity reconsider?" Ambassador Kim gathered her files and stood to leave. "We don't want anything, General. That's what the Council never understood about us. We helped because help was needed, not because we wanted something in return. Now we've been told that help isn't wanted, so we're simply going home." The economic implications became clear within days. Human shipping companies had handled nearly 30% of galactic freight, known for their reliability and reasonable rates. Human research institutes had been freely sharing scientific discoveries that advanced technology across dozens of species. Human manufacturing had produced goods that were built to last rather than break down and require replacement. On the industrial world of Gamma 5, factory manager Alex Chen was overseeing the shutdown of a human-operated facility that produced medical equipment for the entire sector. His Ythron supervisor Dalthor watched with growing alarm as humans began packing sophisticated machinery. "This equipment represents billions of credits of investment," Dalthor protested. "You cannot simply dismantle it." "We're not dismantling it," Alex explained. "We're transferring ownership to your people, along with full technical specifications and training materials. Everything we built here now belongs to the Ythron Colonial Authority. But we don't have the expertise to operate these systems. You will. We're leaving behind complete documentation and training programs. Your people are capable of learning everything we know." Dalthor looked confused. "You're giving us a factory worth billions of credits? For free? We always intended for local species to take over operations eventually. We just expected it to happen more gradually. The pattern was the same everywhere. Humans weren't destroying what they had built or taking their investments with them. They were turning over factories, research facilities, and infrastructure to local species, along with all the knowledge needed to operate them. It was as if an entire civilization was writing its will and giving away its possessions. Most shocking was the response from the species humanity had helped over the years. As news of the withdrawal spread, many began making their own decisions about participation in galactic collective institutions. The Kalari government announced that they would not renew their trade agreements with the Velhari Consortium. The Nexari Colonial Assembly voted to refuse landing rights to Arctonian mining ships. The Ythran frontier worlds declared themselves a free trade zone, open to all species except those that had supported humanity's persecution. These weren't dramatic declarations of war or rebellion. Like humanity, these species simply began saying no to systems they had never really wanted to participate in. The Kalari had always resented paying inflated prices for basic medical supplies. The Nexari had never liked having their world strip-mined for other species' profit. The Ythrans had grown tired of being treated as primitive colonists instead of sovereign people. But humanity's withdrawal had shown them that they didn't have to accept treatment they didn't like. They could simply walk away. The established powers initially celebrated humanity's departure. Without human interference, the Velhari could raise prices on essential goods. The Zephyrians could expand into territories that had been protected by human peacekeepers. The Arctonians could resume profitable operations on worlds where human advisors had stirred up trouble. But as weeks passed, cracks began to appear in their victory. Trade routes that had relied on human shipping faced delays and disruptions. Research projects that had depended on human scientific cooperation ground to a halt. 6 months after humanity's withdrawal from the Galactic Collective, the galaxy was a very different place. The changes started small, but grew larger each day, like cracks in a dam that slowly spread until the whole structure began to fail and, the Kalari homeworld, the plague had returned. Without human medical assistance and technology transfers, the local healthcare system struggled to produce enough medicine. The Velhari Consortium offered to sell medical supplies, but at prices 3 times higher than before humanity's departure. Many Kalari families simply could not afford treatment. Dr. Velnara, the Kalari physician who had worked with human doctors during the first outbreak, stood in her empty clinic looking at shelves that should have been filled with medicine. Her supplies had run out 2 weeks ago and the Velhari shipment wouldn't arrive for another month. 37 deaths this week, she reported to the Kalari Council via hologram. Most could have been prevented with basic antibiotics. The humans taught us how to manufacture these medicines, but the Velhari have convinced the chemical suppliers to stop selling us raw materials. Council Speaker Tethara's feathered crest drooped with exhaustion. The Velhari claim we violated our trade agreements by refusing to pay their inflated prices. They say we must accept market conditions or find other suppliers. What other suppliers? Dr. Velnara asked bitterly. The humans were the only ones who sold medicine at cost. Everyone else sees our suffering as a business opportunity. The situation was similar on dozens of worlds across the galaxy. The Nexari colonies faced another drought season without human agricultural consultants to help optimize their water systems. Crop yields dropped by 40%, leading to food shortages that the Arctonian Agricultural Corporation offered to solve by purchasing Nexari farmland at below-market prices. Elder Kethdar of the Nexari Assembly stood in his withered fields, watching the last of his crops die under the merciless sun. The human-designed irrigation system still worked, but without regular maintenance and upgrades, it couldn't keep up with the expanding drought. The Arctonians say they will buy our land and turn it into hydroponic farms, he told his fellow farmers. They promise jobs for our people, but as workers, not owners. What choice do we have? Asked another farmer. Without the human agricultural advisors, we cannot compete with industrial farming methods. We have the choice our ancestors always had, Kethdar replied. We can adapt or we can surrender. The humans gave us the knowledge, we simply need to find the courage to use it. But adaptation was difficult when the galaxy's economic and political systems were designed to prevent it. Species that tried to develop their own industries found themselves facing trade restrictions, supply shortages, and economic pressure from the established powers. It was becoming clear that the galactic economy depended on keeping most species dependent on a few powerful corporations and trading houses. The military situation was even worse. Without human peacekeepers to maintain stability, conflicts that had been simmering for years exploded into open warfare. The Zephyrian Empire, emboldened by the absence of human interference, launched new expansion campaigns against neighboring systems. General Krex led the invasion of the Nexari border worlds personally, expecting the same easy victories his forces had enjoyed for centuries. But when his fleets arrived at the first target system, they found something unexpected: resistance. The Nexari colonists had spent months preparing for this moment, using defensive strategies they had learned from human military advisors. They couldn't match Zephyrian firepower, but they didn't need to. They only needed to make conquest more expensive than it was worth. Sir, we're taking heavy casualties from improvised defense platforms, reported his tactical officer. The colonists have turned their mining equipment into weapons. General Krex studied the tactical display with growing frustration. These are supposed to be primitive farmers. How do they know advanced defensive tactics? The humans taught them, sir, before the withdrawal. The general's scaled features twisted with anger. Even absent, the humans were still interfering with Zephyrian expansion. What should have been a quick conquest was turning into a costly siege that was draining his military's resources. Similar patterns emerged across the galaxy. Pirates found that raids on formerly human-protected shipping lanes weren't as profitable as expected. The crews they captured had been trained in resistance techniques. The cargo ships they attacked carried defensive systems that made boarding dangerous. The colonies they raided fought back with a coordination and determination that made quick strikes impossible. The humans had taught their friends well, but the real shock came from an unexpected direction. As the established powers celebrated their victory over human interference, they began to notice that their council sessions were becoming smaller. Species that had participated in galactic government for centuries were simply not showing up anymore. Council Speaker Vexthari stood before a chamber that was barely half full, looking at empty seats that had once held delegates from dozens of worlds. The Kalari delegation had stopped attending after their medical crisis began. The Nexari representatives had withdrawn when the drought emergency was ignored. The Ythron colonies had declared their independence from collective authority entirely. "We are experiencing a crisis of participation," she announced to the remaining delegates. Over 60 species have reduced or eliminated their involvement in council activities. Trade Minister Kelthana of the Velari shifted uncomfortably. These species are simply experiencing temporary difficulties. Once they realize they need the stability and protection that only the collective can provide, they will return. "Will they?" asked a delegate from the Altarian Federation, one of the few remaining neutral species. "Or have they realized that the collective primarily serves the interest of those who profit from others' dependence?" The question hung in the air like an accusation. For the first time, species were openly questioning whether the galactic government actually represented their interests or simply provided a legal framework for exploitation. The economic data was becoming impossible to ignore. Galactic trade volume had dropped by 25% as worlds that had depended on human shipping struggled to find alternatives. Research and development had slowed dramatically without human scientific cooperation. Industrial production was declining as factories built and operated by humans were abandoned or operated inefficiently by inexperienced local workers. Corporate Director Malreth of the Arctonian Alliance found himself facing angry shareholders and declining profits. "The humans sabotaged our operations by giving away their technology," he complained to his board of directors. "Local species now think they can operate their own industries instead of working for us. Can't we force them to honor their labor contracts?" asked one board member. "What labor contracts? The humans never required long-term employment agreements. They simply taught people skills and let them make their own choices." The board fell silent as they contemplated the implications. Their entire business model depended on controlling local populations through economic necessity. If people could support themselves independently, they had no reason to work for exploitative wages in dangerous conditions. On Earth, Ambassador Harrison received daily reports about the deteriorating situation across the galaxy. Each communication device chimed with new requests for human assistance, new offers of political concessions, new promises of reform, if only humanity would return to the collective. The most recent message had come from Council Speaker Vexthari herself, offering humanity not just full membership restoration but leadership positions in a reformed galactic government. The message promised that human values would be incorporated into collective policy, and that humanitarian aid would be officially recognized as beneficial rather than disruptive. Harrison read the message in his garden, then deleted it without responding. Through his window he could see human children playing in streets that had never known warfare, breathing air that had never been poisoned by strip mining, drinking water that had never been contaminated by industrial waste. A soft chime indicated another arrival. Harrison looked up to see a small ship landing at the nearby spaceport. Not a human vessel, but a Kalari medical transport. Dr. Velnara emerged, carrying a bag of medical supplies and looking tired but determined. She was not alone. Over the Kitar past month, ships from dozens of species had arrived at Earth and other human worlds. Not as refugees or supplicants, but as friends and partners. The Kalari brought their art and music, sharing cultural treasures that had never been commodified. The Nexari offered philosophical insights and agricultural innovations they had developed since the human withdrawal. The Ythrans arrived with new technologies they had created by building on human scientific foundations. These species hadn't come to Earth to ask for help. They had come to offer cooperation between equals, to build something new together rather than participate in the exploitative systems they had left behind. Harrison walked to his communication console and activated the planetary broadcast system. Across Earth and the human colonies, his voice carried a simple message: